I call the member for Ryde.
Thank you, Speaker. I'd like to continue to explore what I see as one of the defining challenges facing young people in Ryde, and that is the role and influence of social media. The pervasiveness of its impact is still under-recognised and insufficiently understood. On paper, a 14-year-old girl growing up in remote Northern Territory and a young person in Ryde would not have very much in common. But with social media, that distinction no longer holds. Young people are beholden to the same platforms, the same systems, and the same set of pressures. This Friday, the 8th of May, Australians will mark Do It for Dolly Day, where people are encouraged to wear blue, to take a stand against bullying and to promote kindness. It exists because of Dolly Everett. Dolly was 14 years old, growing up in outback Northern Territory. She was subjected to relentless bullying, including online, and in January 2018, she tragically took her own life. Dolly's parents chose to speak publicly about this tragedy and turned their loss into a national campaign about the devastating impacts of cyberbullying. Dolly's story should not have ended the way that it did. Her story raises a clear question about whether enough was understood and done about the environment that enabled it. This is what gives Do It for Dolly Day its weight. It's not just about awareness, it's about whether we have learned anything from Dolly's story. Minor disagreements or interactions are no longer contained to a schoolyard. They move quickly across group chats, platforms and audiences with no reprieve. By the time issues are identified by a school or parent, issues are now more complex, more entrenched and more difficult to resolve. It is no longer simply a question of responding to individual incidents like the bullying that Dolly endured. It is a question of whether the online environment itself is amplifying behaviour in ways we are not adequately addressing. I think it's a pretty easy answer, yes. We are asking young people to exercise judgment, restraint and empathy in a system that does not consistently reward those qualities. We are asking them to slow down when everything around them is designed to speed up, and we are asking them to navigate that largely on their own. At the same time, we should be clear about our own position on this. No level of government has fully come to terms with how these platforms operate in practice. They evolve faster than our frameworks. They shape behaviour in ways that are not easily visible from the outside. And many of the people tasked with regulating them do not experience them in the same way that young people do. That gap has consequences because it limits our ability to respond effectively. It means we are always reacting and not leading. While the most visible impacts in this area, like cyberbullying, the effect is broader than that. Social media and the online environment is changing how people communicate, how quickly they form their views, how willing they are to engage with complexity. The incentives are clear. Content that provokes reaction spreads further. Content that divides holds attention longer. Content that is measured or nuanced is less likely to cut through. That is not incidental. It is built into the system. And over time, that does more than shape behaviour. It reshapes the culture around it. A culture that is quicker to react, slower to listen, and less willing to engage beyond the surface. And young people are growing up influenced by that culture. Short, rapid content cycles, endless scrolling, continuous notifications. Over time, that has an effect. Attention spans shorten, sustained concentration becomes more difficult, communication becomes faster, sharper, and less considered. There is less tolerance for silence, less willingness to sit with complexity, less capacity to pause before responding. There are not always the impacts that attract attention. They are gradual, they're cumulative, they are difficult to measure, but they are increasingly difficult to ignore. And there is a further effect, a sense of pessimism that sits uneasily with what should be a period of confidence and curiosity. That is not a single issue. It reflects the environment that our young people are growing up in. In Ryde, the consequences are being felt deeply, but the systems that young people are operating in are not neutral. They are actively hostile to the behaviours that we are asking of them. That is the issue that we have not yet confronted. Do It for Dolly Day carries a simple, powerful message. To speak even if your voice shakes. It is a message about courage, about standing up for others, about choosing kindness even when it is difficult. And it matters. But it should also prompt us to reflect on the environment in which we are asking young people to do that. Because we are asking them to speak up in spaces that do not consistently support them when they do, to show restraint in systems that reward reaction, to lead with empathy in environments that often amplify the opposite. Dolly, the young people in communities like Ryde have a reasonable expectation to feel safe, not only in their physical environment, but in the spaces where so much of their lives unfold. We are not meeting that expectation, and young people are carrying the consequence of that failure.
I call the member